Welcome back, everyone. If you or someone you know has the strange propensity to give Hamas the benefit of the doubt on just about anything, this video is for you. Recently, Israel has been making unedited videos and very graphic forensics reports available to journalists and the public. This is necessary to counter what some are calling a Holocaust denial-like phenomenon. Many Westerners, from the typical keyboard warriors on social media to students at major universities to politicians and media figures, insist on denying, doubting, or downplaying the brutality of Hamas. This propensity stems from serious ideological issues in the West. I will illustrate the problem using two case studies and then explain why this problem exists. The first case study: did Hamas behead babies? The second: did Israel bomb the Al-Ahli hospital? Let me start with number one and summarize some background. Initially, reports said that dozens of babies were found beheaded. President Biden said that he saw the images. The White House later clarified that he was talking about reports, not images, but they didn't contradict the claim that the beheadings occurred so far as I'm aware. The initial report about the dozens of beheaded babies was not independently verified. Rather than shift to a position of agnosticism, many grounded their denial of the beheadings in the fact that the report was unverified. Additionally, there were no pictures, nor did the terrorists leave any signed confessions or copies of their identification. What a relief. Hamas is absolved. They did not behead babies, and any subsequent reporting about baby decapitations is connected back to the original unverified story and likewise denounced as false. But let's consider a few things.
And we got very, very disturbing reports of that came from the ground that there were babies that had been beheaded. And I admit it took us some time to really understand and to verify that report. And it was hard to believe that even Hamas could perform such a barbaric act. But after eyewitnesses came forward and after a senior official in the Israeli coronary service, Zaka, came forward on record on CBS News and said, yes, I saw the bodies of beheaded babies, I think we can now say with relative confidence that this is unfortunately what happened in Be'eri. This is what Hamas did to Israeli civilians.
Now, is this unverified or is it verified? Does it warrant belief that babies were beheaded by Hamas? Was there actually a reliable source on the ground witnessing this carnage firsthand? Then there's this October 20th release from an Israeli pathology center. Dr. Chen Kugel explained that the age range of the victims spans from 3 months to 80 or 90 years old. Many bodies, including those of babies, are without heads. Asked if they were decapitated, Kugel answered yes, although he admits that, given the circumstances, it's difficult to ascertain whether they were decapitated before or after death, as well as how they were beheaded, whether cut off by knife or blown off by RPG. That's more independent evidence worth considering, and as the Israelis are capturing and interrogating terrorists, more information is coming to light about the goals of these terror attacks. Gunmen were given instructions to kill everyone they saw, including beheading victims and cutting off their legs. The plan was to go from home to home, from room to room, to throw grenades and kill everyone, including women and children, he said. Hamas ordered us to crush their heads and cut them off and to cut their legs. So beheading victims was one of the objectives, and the victims included people of all ages. And there's forensic evidence which confirms earlier reports of beheaded babies. In addition, beheading has also been used by other Islamic terror groups like ISIS. So did Hamas behead babies, or is this all just circumstantial? Finally, for people who continue to deny this, including many in the comments section of this channel, I do not understand the grounds for denial. From the beginning, it's been exceedingly clear that the brutality was unimaginable. Someone needs to explain why it is that Hamas would draw the line at beheading babies. Is that an evidence-driven presupposition? Or is it something else that causes people to give Islamic terrorists the benefit of the doubt? Let's see where Hamas didn't draw the line. Back to the report we saw earlier. During the initial press conference, the forensics team showed images from their investigations. Among the images were those of charred hands with marks that revealed where the victims' hands were bound behind their backs with metal wire before being burned alive. Charred remains in a CT scan of the remains show a parent and child who were bound together and burned alive by Hamas terrorists on October 7th. 2 spinal columns, one of an adult and one of a child, can be seen in the scan. The pair were likely embracing as they burned. The link to this article, which includes some pictures, is in the description box. Hamas also did not draw the line at raping women next to dead bodies of their friends who had just been shot, and the terrorists also had permission to rape corpses. But that's probably fake news, right? It's unverified. There's no reason to presume that the terrorists who were apparently permitted to rape dead bodies, who definitely burned children alive and a host of other unthinkable things, also beheaded babies. We wouldn't want to jump to conclusions. We're smarter than that. Now let's turn to the hospital bombing. Soon after this happened, CNN, MSNBC, the BBC, and Al Jazeera, though I repeat myself, broadcast a narrative something like Israel bombed a medical center, killing 500, according to Palestinian authorities, which is, of course, a reference to Hamas. But a headline openly sourced from Hamas doesn't seem as credible somehow, so you have to hide the ball. So Palestinian authorities it is. But then the most rock-solid proof, ballistics, radar, video, audio began pouring in. As it turns out, the Palestinian authorities, whose goals include overtly manipulating idiotic Westerners through mainstream media propaganda outlets, yet Hamas was manipulating idiotic Westerners through mainstream media propaganda outlets. Who would have known? The evidence was so clear that painful retractions began. Kind of. But as of the time of this video, it's still extraordinarily easy to find mainstream sources saying, "We just don't know who did it. Maybe we never will." Why? Why is it so difficult to accept terrorists who burned children alive also beheaded them? Why is it so difficult to believe that terrorists who repeatedly kill their own people with their own failed rockets did it again? Why does Israel need to go to extraordinary measures to convince Westerners of the violence of Hamas? Answering that gets us to the controversial part. First, many in the West have been indoctrinated with a binary worldview that sees everyone as either oppressed or oppressors. This is connected to the concept of decolonization. The oppressed need to rise up against the oppressors. This is how the wrongs of colonialism are righted. Of course, Israel plays the part of the oppressor, colonizer. Also, Muslims are grouped in with the oppressed. They're the only religious group in the West that I know of graced with their own phobia, Islamophobia, to go along with all of the other phobias of people of other oppressed groups. The end result is that violence against Israel is viewed through the lens of oppressed people rising up against their oppressor. In this idiotic scheme, violence is their only option. It's justified. Second, Westerners fail to acknowledge the role of Islam. As I've already said, Islam is associated with oppressed people, so it can't be criticized, you Islamophobe. Rather than criticize a religion of the oppressed, let's make up other reasons Hamas is doing what they're doing. Reasons that allow us to criticize Israel, the oppressor. After all, criticizing the oppressed only furthers oppression. But be warned, people who do not acknowledge the role that Islam plays will never understand groups like Hamas.
What can you tell us about what motivates these people? What are they like? What are the leaders of Hamas like? What do they want?
Well, they are a religious movement. And this is what everybody is afraid to say. If Hamas was a political movement, then we can satisfy their political ambition. But Hamas is a religious movement that does not believe in political borders. You know, they want to establish an Islamic state on the rubble of the state of Israel. They want to annihilate the Jewish people and the Jewish state. They want to kill everybody who support Israel, then establish an Islamic state. But this is not the end, because their ambition is global. They want to establish eventually an Islamic state, a global state.
Like ISIS and others, Hamas is religiously committed to creating an Islamic state. In the case of Israel, the zeal is heightened due to the rabid anti-Semitism of the Islamic sources. But we really need to talk about the occupation. Hamas is religiously committed to creating an Islamic state. Oh, the apartheid. So much apartheid. Hamas is religiously committed to creating an Islamic state. Hamas is fighting for the oppressed. No, Hamas is religiously committed to creating an Islamic state. Westerners want to see things through their own social political lens, but this is an issue with the religion of Islam. One more time for the most brainwashed viewers. Here we go. Hamas is religiously committed to creating an Islamic state. If you have any doubt, read their 1988 charter. It's in the description box. All you have to do is click on it and read. It will cure your doubt. Third, brainwashed Westerners love the moral equivalence argument. Sure, Hamas burned children alive or something, but Israel, yeah, you've heard it before, minimized the atrocities of Islamic terrorism, raised the anti-Israel rhetoric to the extreme, and there's your moral equivalence. Both sides are effectively doing the same thing. It's just a cycle of violence. This argument is ingrained in the DNA of the indoctrinated. But if people start fully acknowledging the brutal reality of Islamic terrorism that we've seen since October 7th, they lose the moral equivalency argument. Further, there's nothing that justifies lighting children on fire, so they lose the oppressor versus oppressed argument. The brutality ultimately leads them to look for a deeper explanation past the convenient Western presuppositions stemming from Western critical theories to an ideological solution, one that seems all too familiar in our modern world. But acknowledging the explanation as fundamentally religious, fundamentally Islamic, is a fundamental breach of fashionable Western thought. And as Israel releases more horrific footage in response to a pandemic of Hamas support, the incoherence of fashionable Western thought will continue to be exposed, from useful idiots to pro-terrorist rallies. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.